Yeah, let's do it.
Sanders patiently running. Sanders good cut. And another block. Sanders still going inside the 40.
NFC East champs, divisional champs, NFC champs, and world champs.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Victory Tuesday as the Philadelphia Eagles totally dominated the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football 24-7. The score was not indicative of how much the Philadelphia Eagles dominated Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host, LG Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, I'm so glad that I was wrong. I had fears going into the game. I didn't know if Jonathan Gannon was going to be able to adjust his play calling, adjust his scheme. I didn't know if we were going to see the same old Jalen Hurts, and I was proven wrong on all three accounts. My prediction, Jonathan Gannon and Jalen Hurts, and I, for one, could not be more proud to have been wrong.
Yeah, it's okay to be wrong sometimes. I mean, I called the Jordan Hicks interception, but it didn't mean anything because Kirk Cousins
only because of Kenny
turned it
Gainwell
over.
not being able to catch the damn ball.
Yeah, that's true. But I told you asked me for a difference maker, and that was one of the very few difference making plays the Minnesota Vikings had on Monday night, and they still turned the ball back over. So
the blocked field goal that Patrick Peterson somehow blocked, and if it wasn't for Aaron Sipos of all people coming up with that tackle, that's a totally different game. It goes from 24-7 to 24-14, and who knows what happens after that. But he making the
and that
tackle
was a good tackle. That was a good because even Jake Elliott just missed the tackle, but man, Sipos,
and then that led to Darius Slay's first. I think that was Slay's first interception, or it was Maddox's interception. One of them, doesn't really matter. But that was a huge play in the game. You know, I was thoroughly and pleasantly surprised and happy with the outcome of that game. Obviously, the link was rocking, which we anticipated going into it. You knew first home game, it was going to be crazy. The one thing I kind of sort of had thoughts of the first game, Dave, I'm glad we survived that Jalen Reagor revenge game. The Minnesota Vikings had the full Jalen Reagor experience. Him not knowing what to do with punts, him dropping back, like they got the Reagor experience. I thought Reagor was going to do something, but he didn't. I'm glad. But so the first game, the Bills and Titans, the Bills, we proclaimed it last week. They're the best team in football. And then the Eagles doing what they did. Did you see that tweet going around that somebody put, they don't know if the infrastructure would be able to handle an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl. If that would happen.
See that. Oh man, I can guarantee right now that the party outside, wherever it would be, the fans for both teams travel so well, and man, it would be something to see. But yeah, would I love to see it? Yes. Although I think my prediction would lean heavily towards the Buffalo Bills at this point because the Bills are outright dominating.
I'm not even thinking Super Bowl right now, obviously. I'm just taking it one game at a time.
It is hilarious that people are there, though. Like, even the national media after last night
like,
is
literally
Eagles
is the second best team in the NFC right now behind Tampa. Like, it's crazy.
DraftKings has Jalen Hurts with the third best MVP odds, and it's like, to me, it's so much rash reaction to one game. Yes, did we dominate? Yes, but are we just going to put week one in the rear view or just say, oh, week one was just week one, don't worry about that week?
After watching what Detroit did Sunday, that might end up turning into a good win.
Yeah, because realistically, because that Detroit team is actually better than a decent amount of teams in the NFL right now. It's actually pretty impressive what they're doing. And the worst part is, I honestly think they might be they could be a team that's a quarterback away.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. They definitely could be a quarterback away. We all know Jared Goff's not good. Their offensive line's good. They have a lot of good skill position players, and that defense is definitely building up. But let's not talk about the Detroit Lions. We're going to talk the Philadelphia Eagles are 2-0, tied for first place in the division with the New York Giants somehow, some way. And the worst part about it is we have to root, or I'm doing it because I can't root for Dallas. I'm rooting for the New York Giants this next Monday night against Dallas because I can't root for Dallas. So like,
what an atrocious Monday night matchup, by the way.
God.
Like, I mean, not even with or without the Dak Prescott injury, that's not a good matchup. But I mean, suddenly it became kind of good.
The Giants Carolina game was awful on Sunday. The two bad quarterbacks. Cincinnati's turning back into the bungle, so that and their offensive line can't protect.
Even week one for the Giants and Titans game was brutal until the end, and the Giants were able to pull that miracle off on the touchdown and going for 2.
All right, so before we continue on and recapping the game, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. Follow the Painted Lines on Twitter and YouTube at the Painted Lines. Follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at EOP Sports. And if you're tuning into the stream, comment. Let us know your thoughts on the game. We know there are a bunch of detractors of a certain general manager for the Philadelphia Eagles, and you got to give them some love. A.J. Brown has been really good the first 2 weeks. Jalen Hurts, when he was picked in the second round 3 years ago, there was a lot of heat on Howie Roseman for why he made that pick because it was thought that the Eagles had their franchise quarterback in Carson Wentz. Obviously, it's turned out in Howie's favor. It turned out to be a great second-round pick. James Bradbury and Dave, no.
Some people never give the love that he deserves.
Dave, so me and Dave are in a fantasy football league together. If you proclaim – no, I won't say it. I think you know where I'm going to go with this. I know you want Treylon Burks. You know where to go. No, I'm kidding. He wants Treylon Burks for me. You got to give love to Howie Roseman for us to talk it out. The Eagles have the best cornerback tandem and cornerback trio in football, if you think about it. With Darius Slay, who could have had 6 picks yesterday. It was crazy. Could have had 6 picks if he wanted to. He was all over Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, who I was afraid of coming into the game. 6 catches, 48 yards. Take that every week. I'll take that every week. Darius Slay should be NFC Defensive Player of the Week. James Bradbury hasn't given up much of it. We haven't heard his name, which is good. I mean, he had the interception against Detroit. We really haven't heard his name. And
we've heard his name in the missed tackle column a bit, but none of them have been detrimental to the team. So
yeah, that's the entire defense. And then Avonte Maddox, who had a bad first game, had an interception yesterday. He was tackling. You got to just the roster that Howie has put together. Look, we know what happened in 2017 when the Eagles won. Is this roster better than that roster?
I would argue on paper, yes. I think that this roster is definitely better than that roster. That roster was chocked full of veterans, and this roster is definitely like 3 or 4 years in average age younger than that roster. So it's extremely different. Like the builds are like, so Howie got into this weird bubble after the 2017 season where he wanted these veteran players. He went into the offseason, he got all these vets, and everyone was saying, we want younger people, we need younger players. And suddenly this offseason, he took that turn. Kaiser White's like 25 years old. James Bradbury is only 28 years old. We're not talking 30-plus-year-old players anymore.
He actually went 23.
Yeah, he's really young. Like he went out and did a completely different strategy. So I think on paper it looks a lot better because the team is younger. There's some more proven players. They're not all over the age of 30 and this could be their last year type of thing. He's got a really good mix, which to me presents a better roster than what we had in 2017. Now, can we get the miracles that the 2017 team had? That's going to be the big telltale.
Yeah, you have to give this coaching staff a really, you got to give them a round of applause. Shane Steichen, it felt like every play he called was the right play. And then Jonathan Gannon, a total 180 flip from last week. He was pressuring Kirk Cousins. He did man on the receivers. We know how talented that receiver group is for Minnesota. And Dalvin Cook didn't do anything. And I was shocked about that. They did
the lead in rusher was Kirk Cousins with 20 yards.
Yeah, I'll take that all day.
yards.
I'll take that all day. Let's start on the offensive side of the football for the Philadelphia Eagles. And he deserves a lot of credit. Jalen Hurts so early in the game, there was a lot of praise for the throws he was making. I didn't get to that point only because I was saying these are throws quarterbacks should make. And like that, and that's what and this was again in the first half. He started 7 of 7, 8 of 8. And I think the best throw Jalen Hurts made was the one that was the incompletion. The pass to Dallas Goedert was the best throw.
The drop by Dallas Goedert.
It wasn't a drop.
It was a tough catch to make
for
Dallas Goedert, but
Dantzler hit him and forced the ball out. But he got the ball over the corner in between the safety. And I mean, like, again, could Goddard have made the catch? Yes. He probably should have made the catch. Probably. You got to give Dantzler credit for knocking it loose. But that was the best throw that Hurts made. And it wasn't even a completion. There was another throw, I think it was in the third quarter, maybe fourth quarter, where he was rolling out to the left, stopped, turned, and threw it to Quez Watkins on a dime. Ended up coming back because there was like 3 or 4 ineligible man downfield penalties on the Eagles. That was ridiculous. It's got to stop. But
that's part of running the offense that they run, though.
Yeah, that RPO offense.
Jalen Hurts has to make the decision quicker, the read quicker. But like the thing is, like, the offensive line doesn't know what he's thinking. They're just pushing bodies and get into the next level. So it makes it really difficult for them. And I think we probably led the league last year in them too. We had a ton of them last year, but last night we had more last night than I think we had in like an 8-game stretch last season. That was insane.
Yeah, Dave said for the first. We'll get to that Dave's comment. When we get to the defense. But look, Jalen Hurts was good last week. He did it with his legs. This week, he did a lot. He had a couple really good runs. He did a lot with his arm. He was able to hit Quez on the 53-yard touchdown. Who I don't know what the safety was doing for Minnesota. Like, it was Jack freaking Stahl that was running that out pattern. How you're going to worry about Jack Stahl over Quez Watkins, I'll never understand. But you have to give you have to give Jalen Hurts a lot of credit. Look, 1 game, okay, I like to see it. 2 games, I'm there. I need to see it 3. If I see it again this week, I'm going to definitely be on board. Look, I'm not all the way there yet. I'm not going to say he's a franchise quarterback, but Jalen Hurts is proving detractors wrong. And that's what you like to see. And again, the one thing that we talked about with 2 first-round picks next year, if you don't have to use those picks on a quarterback and you can use it to bolster the defensive line, bolster the secondary, that's going to be good for not only Jalen Hurts, it's going to be good for the entire team. Jalen Hurts will be here as the starter, and you're going to be able to put weapons on the defensive side of the ball to be able to get after the quarterback, because if there's one thing the Eagles couldn't do yesterday, it was still get after the quarterback.
Yeah, the good thing was they did get 23 pressures. It just didn't translate in the department of the sack department, which is kind of frustrating. I get it, but there was like 1 sack that was called back for the face mask and stuff. So I mean, we could have had 3 or 4 sacks, but it didn't end up coming to fruition. And Kirk Cousins is a smart quarterback. He got the ball out quick. Like, if that was Jared Goff and we were getting that pressure last week, we have 6 or 7 sacks last week.
I mean, Goff got rid of the ball the quickest in football last week.
Exactly. But Kirk Cousins is good when pressure's coming to make the decision, whereas that wouldn't have been the same for Jared Goff. If he held on to that ball for half a second longer in instances like last night, he would have been sacked. But offensively, Jalen Hurts, there's another thing that I need to see from Jalen Hurts, and these are the big games. These aren't necessarily big games. It's a primetime game. It was a complete domination on the offensive side of the ball. And I promise I want to be positive in this episode, because the last episode we got called out for being negative, and we have so much positives to talk about. But I got to see it in big games and when it matters. If we need to call upon Jalen Hurts to make a play, 3rd down, we're down by a field goal, less than 2 minutes to go, game's on the line, and he throws a pick, or he can't complete the pass, or he tucks and runs and gets hit, and we don't get the first down. Like, that's the type of situations that I really want to start to see Jalen Hurts excel in. But I mean, dominating a game like he dominated last night is definitely a massive step in the right direction. He was making some really good throws. Like you said, that throw to Dallas Goedert was beautiful. That bomb to Quez Watkins was a thing of beauty. Was it blown coverage? Absolutely. But
better
there's
be
no
able to make that throw.
guarantees that Jalen Hurts makes that read every time. Like the fact that he makes that read's impressive.
One thing I disagree with you is I would classify yesterday as a big game because it's prime time. We saw what happened in prime time last year. You got killed by Dallas, got killed by Tampa in the playoffs. Like the Eagles were not good in prime time last year. Jalen was not good in prime time last year. I would consider, while the Eagles were about 2-point favorites, and that could just be because of home field advantage, you had a team that came in after thoroughly dominating the reigning MVP and Green Bay, even though Green Bay doesn't care about week 1 games. A team that has a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the football, has a pretty aggressive defense. I would classify that as a big game for Jalen Hurts. And I think he passed that test with flying colors. Now, like if you look at the schedule going forward, they do play Green Bay. I think Green Bay is going to finish better Green Bay is going to be better than the Vikings.
There's a lot of skepticism with Green Bay, but Green Bay is still a good team. Green Bay,
I think they're going to end up being better than the Vikings. But if you look going forward in Arizona, Arizona's always hit and miss because of Kyler Murray. Even though Kyler Murray was ridiculous in the fourth quarter against,
but they're very missed right now. Like I saw some people tweeting saying they're probably one of the worst looking football teams in football right now, but they came back. They came back. They made that game against Vegas. So
yeah. So like again, and I don't want to look too far ahead, but you have Washington this week. They may be the second best team in the division, potentially. Who knows? It depends on Carson Wentz, obviously. Then they have Jacksonville. Jacksonville's not good. Even if Doug Peterson, I think, is the right coach for them. Then they have the Cardinals. Then they have that big game against Dallas. So that's up leading up to the bye. There's the first 6 games. I mean, obviously you don't want to project, but like if the Eagles aren't 5-1, 6-0 at that point, I think that's a failure. Going into the bye week, and like the schedule. Obviously, the NFC East. I think all 4 teams have the 4 easiest schedules in the league. Mainly because they play each other and whatnot, and it's not the greatest division. But you have to be able to, take advantage of the teams that are going to be on the schedule before you get into the tough part, before you get to the Steelers and I thought the Colts were going to be tough, but I don't think that's going to happen anymore. Packers, like before you get Dallas on Christmas Eve in Dallas with Dak's going to be healthy, and that team should be better. We'll see, obviously, but you have to be able to take advantage of it. And this is where I want to see Jalen Hurts continue to take steps. Last week they won with him being the focal point running the football. Again, 16 carries. This week he threw for 333 yards. Defensive coordinators will have to go crazy over how do we defend this Philadelphia Eagles offense? Are they going to come out and be a running team because we all know they can run the football with that offensive line and with Jalen Hurts? Or is he going to they spread the wealth yesterday. Devonta Smith had 7 catches. AJ Brown had 5 catches. Dallas Goedert had 4 or 5. Wes Watkins had a couple. Zach Path, they spread the football around. Now defensive coordinators each week are going to have to devise a game plan to stop the run and stop the pass, or pick one and hope that the Eagles didn't practice that one that they didn't pick. If you kind of get where I'm going, so we'll see. But the Eagles' offense right now has the potential to be very, very explosive. They're not Bills explosive, but they have the potential to be really, really explosive. And it's going to be tough for the opposing teams to figure out how to stop them.
I agree. I mean, you have Miles Sanders, who went 17 carries for 80 yards, which 4.7 yards per carry. That's pretty impressive. Then you got Jalen Hurts. He ran 11 times for 57 yards. That's a 5.2 average. And 2 of those touchdowns came on the ground. He can tuck, he can run. And one of them was
26-yard run.
That was a big boy run. That was a good,
how
when
he didn't
he
get
got to
at
the end,
5 was ridiculous.
Exactly. My thoughts exactly too. And like you said, 333 yards, that's huge. 31 pass attempts, but they still rushed the ball 34 times. They still technically were a run first team by that standard. So that's crazy to me. You get to that point where you can almost be a 50-50 team from a rushing and from a passing perspective, and you literally are very effective in both sides of it. They averaged 4.8 yards per carry as a team. and then they averaged 12.8 yards per reception. That's huge. Like you can't, but I mean, to be honest, the strategy by the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator was Jonathan Gannon last year to a T. That too high shell defense, I was getting frustrated watching it from a Vikings standpoint, because I was like, how can you continue to do this? Because clearly, and that was one of the things that when me and you were messaging last night, I said, you take what you're given. Last year, that's what quarterbacks did, and we praised quarterbacks for doing it. There's no reason we're going to go the other way and turn the shoulder to Jalen Hurts and say, well, he was just taking what he was given. No, that's a good thing that he took what was given to him, because sometimes that's not necessarily what Jalen Hurts would have done last season. This, to me, that's an improvement. But it's just that the strategy was brutal. Like every time those safeties ran 20 yards away and the snap went and they had that shell going.
And before you continue, like I wasn't mad at Jalen for taking it. I was mad at the praise that Jalen was making simplistic throws, and people were like, see, he can be the guy. Like that was my only issue with it. Like they were praising him because he was making the throws that an NFL quarterback should make. And I get it. We didn't see it often last year, but I need to see the consistency of it. I don't want to see one and be like, oh, all hail Jalen Hurts. Like, no, I don't want that. I need to see it. I need to see it, play after play after play, week after week after week, before I can buy in. And look, the attitude and just the type of person that Jalen is, I know that he's going to continue to work at it, and try to become better. And obviously that's, as I mentioned earlier, that's what the Eagles want, so that they don't have to spend the assets that they have on a quarterback next year. So we'll see what happens. But
lastly, I get
this performance.
I guess we can't stop talking about the offense without talking about the offensive line, because the offensive line played extremely well yesterday.
Way better than last week.
Way better. They allowed only 6 pressures, 5 hurries, 1 hit, no sacks, which is definitely a positive after what we saw last week. And from a pass blocking perspective, they were phenomenal. They gave Jalen Hurts lots of time. Jalen Hurts took his time. You could actually see on TV that he was going through more than one read, because he had the time to go through more than one read, and he didn't just tuck the ball and go. So definitely, before we move to the defense, have to give some praise where praise is due, and that's that offensive line looked phenomenal through that entire game.
Yeah, they definitely did. It looked a lot better. Chris Scott Hurts through 2 games, 600 yards passing, 150 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns. I think it's only 1 passing touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he only has 1 passing touchdown.
And then there was that stat that I shared today that it was it was the first time in NFL history that a quarterback had an 80% completion percentage, 300 passing yards, and a rushing touchdown or something.
2 rushing touchdowns.
But it was even a rushing touchdown. I don't think it ever happened, that combination of 3 things in NFL history. And this is not the first time Jalen Hurts has done this. So we know Jalen Hurts is special, but he's got to continue to show, like, if he can dominate games like that offensively, if he can make life a complete live-in hell for defensive coordinators, although, I mean, to be honest, that defensive coordinator made 0 attempt to adjust to anything yesterday. But if he can continue to dominate defenses, if they do make changes, that's then Jalen Hurts, the ability to use those 2 firsts next season is massive for us.
It is. Now let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Go back to Dave's comment. For the first time under this staff on defense, we looked like the aggressor instead of just reacting to what the offense was doing. And I was shocked. Again, on Friday, both Connor and I were not sure that Gannon was going to be able to adjust, change his scheme, and he did that. He went man, he didn't go zone, and let Darius Slay follow Justin Jefferson the entire game. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Slay could have had 6 picks. It was ridiculous. It was like Kirk Cousins was throwing the ball to Slay. That's how good Slay was yesterday. And Chris, I told you both that Gannon would change his scheme for this game. He did, and look. The only reason I think Connor and I both said that he wasn't is because he has shown his propensity to stick with what he does. Now, I want to see him consistently change the scheme, adjust in game. I don't want this to be a 1-game thing, and then next week against against Washington, Carson Wentz throws for 400 yards and Jahan Dotson and McLaurin go out and have 2 touchdowns each because they're playing that zone 2 high safety and Slay's not following McLaurin around. Like, that's what I think should happen this week. It should continue to happen. If there's a legit number 1 receiver on the other side, that's who Slay should be on. And if Gannon doesn't do that and doesn't adjust and teams are running the ball down our throats and still not adjusting to a 5-man front or something like that, that's where I have the issue with Gannon. Again, same thing with Hurts. I saw it one game. Very encouraging. I need to see it again. And again, like, one game doesn't do it for me. I need to see it happen consistently. Yep, exactly.
Like we see franchise quarterbacks struggle periodically, which is fine. It's life. But we need to see him be consistent as possible. You have a game or 2 where you're off, that's fine. It happens to the best of us. I mean, there's a good example when you look at Matt Stafford right now. He's going through a bit of a funk. Like, there's guys who go through these moments, but we need to see as much consistency as humanly possible. Unless, like, it's a really tough matchup and you just can't seem to figure it out. That happens. But last year, it just happened far too much. As soon as when we ran through, what was it, that stretch of like 7 or 8 games against really good teams or decent opponents, or like games
77% completion.
Yeah, exactly. Or games where we lost and we could have won it. And then we hit the easy teams and he went on a stretch of just dominating the easy teams. He needs to be able to have more consistency, not split the schedule rate in half and have 7 games here and 8 games here. And we need to see it consistently. So I agree on that front.
And as I mentioned, the schedule kind of sets up for the Eagles that if they can continue to be the aggressor and continue to be able to make, teams overthink going into the week, then they should, and it sets up to where they should be able to help themselves going into to that tough portion where they get Green Bay. They get maybe Indianapolis will be better by then. They'll be able to get, or Dallas might be better then, but they'll be able to build enough wins, get 6, 7, 8, 9 wins by that time to where if they do struggle during the stretch, they'll have that buffer maybe in the division, because I don't think the division is going to be good. You want to have a couple of games just in case, like, you run, it's not going. They're not going to go 17-0. They're not going to be the Patriots or the 72 Dolphins. Like, it's not going to happen. You're going to run into stumbling blocks in the season, but you want to be able to kind of give yourself a buffer to where it doesn't hurt you. But yeah, let's move into continue with the defense. The one, and again, I don't want to be Mr. Negative, but Hassan Reddick still isn't impressed. There were plays that Jonathan Gannon dropped Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat in coverage, and it bothered the hell out of me.
It was 4 for Reddick this week and 2 for Sweat. So it actually came down from the 5 and the 3 of last week. So he dropped them back less. But the fact that, first of all, I think the one thing has to become clear. Josh Sweat never should be back in coverage.
No.
Ever.
The Vikings did that with Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, and to me, at the end of the day, I don't care. Oh, it's the scheme. What are you going to do if this is what the scheme calls for? That is your defensive end. You paid him an extension to be a defensive end, to get after the quarterback. There is never a reason as a 4-3 front that we use, or as the sub-nickel package that we use. There is no reason you ever have that man dropping back into coverage. Reddick, okay, if you do it periodically, that's fine. He got made to look a fool on one play, Reddick, when he dropped back into coverage in the tight end. I think it was Mundt made the play. I don't know for sure who made that play, but he was made to look a fool. And that's because that's just not who Reddick is. And we talked about it when the acquisition of Reddick came around. His first 2 years, he was a off-ball linebacker who didn't go after the quarterback very much, and he got manhandle. He looked terrible. He looked like he was going to be a bust in the league. Then he went over to Carolina. Yeah, it was Carolina, right? No, yeah. Arizona? Carolina. Okay, so he went over to Carolina. Yeah. Okay, so then he went over to Carolina. They gave him a chance to be more of a get after the quarterback edge type of guy, and that is what we paid the man for. He is supposed to be an edge. He is supposed to be a linebacker, a blitzing linebacker, whatever you want to do. We pretty much should have 5 men going after the quarterback at all times. One thing I will say, TJ Edwards looked really good when he was given the opportunity to go after the quarterback. When Jonathan Gannon would call those timely blitzes, Edwards just shot out of a cannon through the hole in the offensive line. It was great to see. But I agree with you. We didn't pay Edwards yet. While I think we're going to end up paying Edwards and he's going to remain an Eagle long term, we paid Reddick, and Reddick really needs to step up.
He really does. I don't want to see him or Sweat dropping back. Get after the quarterback. I know we had a couple of sacks yesterday. Fletcher Cox getting the strip sack, Josh Sweat getting the sack at the end. But I want to see more. Again, we brought in Reddick because we finished 29th in the league in sacks last year. A couple of the comments. Chris Scott, I'm still not a Gannon fan. He needs to be consistent. Definitely does. I agree with Hurts needing to be consistent as well.
I want to touch on Sean's comment. So he says, "What's up, guys?" So what's up, Sean? He says, "I want to see more of Jordan Davis. 21 snaps doesn't cut it. Trial by fire from." I get it, but when you look at it, Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox were really good last
You can't take those guys off the field when they're playing.
You can't
as well
in
as
those
they did.
situations, and they took them off enough. Like they each, I think they played 66 and 64% of snaps. But you can't take Jordan. You can't take him out just to put Jordan Davis in to go trial by fire, especially when the defense was playing the way they did. While I definitely agree, if they start to struggle, if they look gassed like week one, inexcusable that Jordan Davis didn't see more time. Week 2, a little more excusable because Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave looked phenomenal, and Marlon Tuipolito did not out snap him this week, so that was a bonus for us.
Again, there's that adjustment. And the guy that we both want to see, which I think we'll see but then again, with the way the linebackers are playing now, not needed. You don't want to rush them, but Nakobe Dean didn't get any defensive snaps. That's fine. You don't want to rush him out there, because he's going to
especially when the linebackers are looking the way they look.
Yeah,
you can't take TJ Edwards off the field at this point.
TJ Edwards is the best linebacker on the field yesterday. He was crazy good getting after the quarterback, and when he got the chance to blitz, he did an outstanding job. Dave says, I'm still not a Gannon fan either. Hopefully him and Howie will both be in Carolina or something next year.
Listen, I don't think Dave will ever be a Gannon fan or a Howie fan. So
he won't.
Dave, you don't ever have to tell us that because we know it's not going to happen.
His loathe of Gannon and Howie is the same as my loathe of Boston Scott.
Which he exploded for one great run last night and then pretty much did nothing else. But that's what we expect.
Yeah, Chris says, I better not see Reddick in coverage again. He needs to strictly be a pass rusher, something that Connor and I have said in the preseason and we said last week and we said again this week, and I'm pretty sure we'll say it again every week until that's what he strictly does.
Now, Gannon's working his way backwards. It was 5 dropbacks last week. It was 4 this week. And I hope that on that play where he really you could tell that's why he's never in coverage, that's enough for Gannon to say, all right, I should probably scheme some plays where you just never drop back again. I'd rather see TJ Edwards drop back into coverage. I think you can trust him a little bit more.
Well, I mean, TJ Edwards is also an actual linebacker.
He is, and I think TJ Edwards, he was targeted 9 times. He allowed 6 receptions, but it was only for 32 yards. He even got a pass breakup out of it, and he did miss 3 tackles, but he's generally a fairly solid tackler, and that's why they don't create much after the catch with going after TJ Edwards.
Yeah, and again, he had a great game yesterday. Kaiser White was good. Let's see. Sean says, give Gardner Johnson 2 more games. He'll be knocking people around in no time. I still think he is trying to adjust to the scheme and to the players. He's like it takes more than 2 weeks. I do agree that give him some time and he's going to be fine. Like we talked about week 1, he led the team in missed tackles. How many missed tackles did he have yesterday? Did he have any? A couple?
He had 1 missed tackle yesterday. And I think one of the good things is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was one of few defensive players, if not one of the only defensive players to play 100% snaps. So
there
Sean
were 3,
spoke
I think.
about
Him, Epps, and maybe Bradbury.
There was a third one. I don't think it was a cornerback, but I can't remember.
I know it was Epps and Johnson.
Okay, yeah, it was Epps, Bradbury, and it was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. All played.
I thought it was Bradbury.
100% snaps, and Sean spoke about trial by fire for Jordan Davis. This is it for Gardner-Johnson. They're doing trial by fire. Learn the scheme while playing in it. We picked you up to be one of these 2 safeties, a versatile player in our scheme. And he's being put out there while he's being put through the ringer. And the last couple weeks have been rough. Like you said, Sean, give it a couple more games. The guy's going to be just fine.
I didn't mean to skip over this comment from the Fish Hobbyist. The O-line looked locked in. I thought 100% agreed. Way better than last week. Eagles still ran the ball down the throat, gave protection to Jalen. I think, did he get sacked yesterday? If he did, it was only 1 or 2 times.
Jalen Hurts, no
sacks. Like he was when he needed to move, he moved. And I don't think now there was maybe a play or two that he went out the pocket a little early, but I don't think he went out the pocket early at times. He stood in the pocket, stood up tall, in a 6-foot frame, and was able to get rid of the football. Dave's comment: the Vikings ran less plays than Detroit. If you look at Davis' play percentage, it was higher. You got it. That's true. His play percentage was higher. I know we want to see the number of plays go up, which I think eventually we will. But as Connor said, when Cox and Hargrave are playing as good as they played yesterday, and look, we won't see them play that well all the time, so we'll be able to have this argument of when Jordan Davis should be on the field. But when they're playing as well as they played yesterday, it's hard to take them two off the field, especially with the money that they're making. I know while we don't want to think money should be the end-all, be-all, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is.
And I think ultimately here in the defense, it's more of a situation where you're never going to see 100% for a defensive tackle for snap count. You're never going to see it. It's this.
Aaron
there's
Donald
a reason,
doesn't play 100% of the snaps.
Exactly, and they rely so much on a rotation. Like if he reaches 65%. That's a good amount. Like 65 is your starting caliber defensive tackle. So once he hits that 65% threshold, he's at a good point. That's what Hargrave and Cox played yesterday. It was like 66 and 64 or something. That's just what you're going to see. And that's why how he focuses on building the trenches, because when you rush for all the time, you're going to exhaust some of these guys. Like last week, Hargrave and Cox looked gassed so quickly, so early in the game. And that's why you got to have 4 or 5 DTs who can cycle constantly.
And I want to kind of go off of what you said, how the defense in general looked gassed. They didn't look that gassed yesterday. And I think they got that week 1 out the way. Again, usually the first 4 games are pretty much preseason at this point because nobody plays in the actual preseason. So they're gonna build up their stamina, and like the guys should be able to be in better. I don't want to say better shape because I'm not saying they're out of shape, but they're gonna be better physical shape, I guess, going into this Washington game where they should be able to play more. Sean says, I want to see Reddick in the Joker position, rushing the quarterback and collapsing the pocket, doing what he does best. 100% agreed. Don't want to see him dropping back into coverage. We saw it a couple times yesterday. Didn't look good. It was frustrating to see number 7. Still weird to see a number 7 at defensive end and not quarterback for the Eagles. Going back,
it's really weird to see number 4 be Dalvin Cook. I know that's not us, but every time I saw number 4, I'm like, that's the most hideous backfield number ever. Get that. That's
what he wore at college.
I know. I get it. It's just an ugly number in the backfield. Jock Talk. What's up, buddy? Welcome aboard. We are doing great because we're talking about an Eagles win.
Victory Tuesday.
Otherwise, defensively, I mean, I think we hit on everything. I think I really was impressed with it. Was an all-around effort. I think my biggest concern at this point is special teams. Like
oh my God.
Okay, so you told me, and I've wanted to buy into Britton Covey so bad and think that he was the answer while he outplayed Jalen Reagor, which is not much of an accomplishment, and it was only minimally better in the return game. You said Britton Covey's not the answer. We now are 2 games that he has been called out.
Also, Quez Watkins isn't the answer as a kickoff returner.
No, Quez Watkins is not. No, Quez Watkins is just let that bounce out every time. But we are now at 2 games. The next game, if you call him up, you have to bring him to your active roster. He's no longer practice squad eligible. So they have a major decision to make if Britton Covey's the answer. And listen, is Covey the be-all, end-all of the special teams issues? No, I think special teams all the way across the board is not very good. I think we've completely moved away and said, who are the guys who give us the best chance to win? And then you fill in the gaps of, okay, who fits on special teams? And there's just not enough players who fit there anymore that are really efficient at it. And that's worse because they gave up the block. The best guy on the team for special teams is Jake Elliott, which is great. You want to have a really good kicker. We're seeing it every single week.
Noah Tongai was the wing on that field goal and didn't block Peterson at all.
And it didn't even look like he made an effort. Like, it was really gross when they showed the replay. I was like, did he even like try to move over? Which he's actually on 2 games called up as well. So they're going to have a big decision to make on Togai and on Covey as to whether or not they want to keep those 2 guys around.
And
because the next time they call them up, they got to sign them.
And the hardest part about Covey is like they don't have another option for a punt returner right now. Do you put Kenny Gainwell back there? Do you put Boston Scott back there? Like, who?
At this point, you accept that you're going to be.
You put Devonta Smith back there and tell him just catch it. Don't run. Just catch it so you don't get hurt. Like, you just tell him to do that. That's where you kind of miss Greg. Like Greg Ward, as much as he wasn't the greatest at it, at least like he was on the roster and he could catch the ball sometimes. Like a lot of times he let it bounce, but like. If you don't care about returns, just put Devontae back there and have him fair catch everything, which might be the smartest thing to do. Because he did it at Alabama. He was the punt returner in Alabama. So, like, he has the experience of doing it. And I know you don't want to put your second receiver out there, but my thing is if he's not going to return, which they can't return anyway, Covey hasn't had much success, just go back there, fair catch it, put the ball down, and get ready for offense. And if you're going to have that happen, just put Devontae back there.
Britton Covey was 3 for 14, which is a 4.7 average.
Awful.
You're essentially taking fair catches each time.
Exactly.
You're not really putting us in a better position. So like you said, if you have a guy who can make the right decision of, okay, let it go, I think it might bounce out, or it's just not worth going after, or okay, I'm going to make this catch. If you have someone who can make that logical decision, at this point, unless you're going out to free agency and you're finding a guy strictly for that position, which at that point, are you able to fit him on that 46
they only have 52
game day roster?
They only have 52 on the active roster right now. So, like, they have the ability to add somebody to that, which if they, in turn, if they needed to put him on the 46 for game day, they could. But also, if that person was out there, he would already be on another team. Like, so I don't think that punt returner is actually out there.
But now we're in this even worse situation because we have 4 wide receivers going in week and week out. So you automatically know you have to elevate a wide receiver. So eventually it's going to be Deion Kane or it's going to be Britton Covey, but somebody is going to end up on this active roster because you're going to run out of calling them up. You're going to run out of times to call them up to the active roster before signing them. So they have to make a decision. Do we value trying to get someone in here who can return a punt, or do we value just having a 5th wide receiver who might be able to be effective in this offense? And at this point, I think you take the 5th wide receiver who's going to be most effective in this offense, which Britton Covey gets 0 snaps on the offense. He gets nothing.
In his defense, like Zach Pascal doesn't get much either. Like
no, it's a 3-man. It's Watkins, it's Smith, and it's AJB. So
he says, give it a couple of days. The Vikings cut Rager and Howie signs him back.
No, see, that's not.
Did you hear the Vikings special teams coach talk about Rager?
Rager was 2 for 5 for 2.5 in punt returns. He was worse than Britton Covey. By 2 yards.
Like I said, they got the full Jalen Rager experience. Jock Talk says the MVP of the defense is Siposs. We talked about that earlier, where Siposs doesn't make that tackle and they return the block field goal for a touchdown. It's 24-14, and the game totally turns. Goes from a 3-possession game to a 2-possession game, and all the momentum's on Minnesota's side. And I definitely agree it's better to catch than fumble and give the ball back. That's why if that's all they want, put Devontae has short hands. He did it in college. Not asking him to return so he gets hit and gets hurt. Go back there, fair catch it, put the ball down, get ready for offense.
I just sometimes get really worried, even in a situation where you're putting them back there, because sometimes you see those guys, if somebody's really angry, they might just spitefully go, take the 1-game suspension and live with it. And I don't want to see any risk associated with putting Devonta Smith back there, but you just have to have someone you can trust to catch that ball. Gainwell's definitely not going to be the answer at all, especially after that tip pass that turned into an interception. We don't need Butterfingers back there. That's no better than Jalen Reagor. So they do really have to make a decision, but our special teams has gone downhill so fast. All we really have to be proud of, Siposs has been better as a punter.
He also started off last year really good and went downhill. So I need to see a consistency again. That word consistency that I want to see from Gannon, I want to see from Hurts, Steichen. Also want to see it from Siposs because he started off last year good, and then was awful when it got cold.
And then of course Jake Elliott's great. We're never going to say anything bad about Jake Elliott. If that,
that block field goal
blocked,
really wasn't his fault.
No, and if that was blocked, if that actually gets kicked, we probably won 27-7. But it got blocked. So at the end of the day, that's
we're not
life.
We're not blaming Hurts for that interception. We all know it was Gainwell's fault. Obviously, it goes on Jalen Hurts' stats as an interception, but everybody that watched the game saw
whoever's saying that it Hurts gets any blame for that, you send them to the Kelly Green Hour because we need to have a discussion about that. I always feel it unfair that the quarterbacks be 100% responsible.
Do you think they should change it to where if it literally goes off of receivers' hands, like that the interception should go on them and not the quarterback? They should
100%. I think so. I 100% think so. I think that there should be a stat like that. You have drops. Why can't you count interceptions against the receiving player?
Yeah. All right. So before we finish off, our the segment that we like is the unheralded player of the week. And what do we mean by unheralded, Connor? We don't want the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen's. We want a guy that nobody foresaw doing something big. Somebody that kind of came out of nowhere. Who would your unheralded player of the week for week 2 be?
This is definitely not a guy people saw this guy coming. I loved him. When I was talking wide receivers for the 2023 draft, there was a 1A, there was a 1B. There was Jameson Williams, who we have not seen yet, but we will see, and I think he's going to be an incredible talent for Detroit. Then there was my unheralded player of the week, and that is Garrett Wilson. While eventually we all knew we were going to see him and this was going to happen.
He's not going to be unheralded much longer.
No, this is a one-time I use him because I'm never going to get to use him again. He was huge in the Jets making that comeback win against the Cleveland Browns, which, man, it must suck in Cleveland. But 8 receptions, 102 yards, and 2 TDs.
The games on Sunday were crazy, by the way. The comebacks. The Jets come back. The Dolphins come back against the Ravens. The Cardinals come back against the Raiders.
The Falcons didn't complete it, but they had a hell of a run to try and come back because I think they were down 28-3.
Yeah, it was 28-3.
The jokes were flying around Twitter.
Yeah, there was a lot of craziness on Sunday, and as an Eagles fan, it was good not to have to sit there and stress through like an Eagles game that happened. And one of the things I was thinking yesterday is I was not getting excited until zeros on the board because I watched football on Sunday. All right. So I know
we were messaging back and forth, and I think it was the end of the first quarter or like early second quarter. Like, I'm not saying anything. I'm not getting excited. But then you got a bit more excited after, once the third quarter got going and we continued to dominate. But
yeah, well, I mean, there was no scoring in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. That was a great defense, especially and the Vikings had short fields. The block punt with the interception by Hicks, like. Got to give Darius Slay a lot of credit. Avante Matt, just give the entire defense and Gannon a lot of credit. So
by the way, Jock Talk, before you go, yes, we talked about the great game Shane called. And if for anyone who doesn't follow him, he can't be identified right now, but he is a former Eagles scout. He says the Honest NFL guy on Twitter, and he says Shane Steichen will be gone in the offseason. And he said, I saw him post in a response to what somebody said, pretty much saying, I know what teams look for, and Shane Steichen is exactly what they look for in today's NFL. So there's a good chance. Yeah, there's a good chance we lose 2 coordinators this year. If Gannon keeps it up, Gannon and Steichen could be out the door.
So when it comes to Steichen going, there's no issue with that, only because it's still I know Nick Sirianni's not calling the plays, but it's his offense. So there's not.
He'll call Brian Johnson up, the quarterback.
Probably Brian Johnson will probably be the next coordinator.
He did it in college, I think, for Florida or wherever he was there. So
yeah, he was at Florida. And then I guess for defensive coordinator, I mean, Vic Fangio, I would bring in. He was at camp for a couple of weeks, kind of in an advisory role. So he's a guy I would look. Not sure. I mean, they might. I think they like their secondary coach a lot. There's the potential to be a defensive coordinator, but that's something obviously we're not going to really think about now. There's only week 2. We got 16 weeks left, plus hopefully the playoffs. So my unheralded player of the week for week 2 Same game as you. I'm going with the third. Was he 38-39? Joe Flacco, 26 of 44, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And they were down 2 scores with a minute 50 and some change left. And he was able to
crazy.
I can't believe Nick Chubb didn't kneel the ball at the one. He didn't pull Brian Westbrook. You pull Brian Westbrook, kneel down at the one, the Browns win the game, and we're not talking about the Jets right now. Jets will be 0-2. But no, they were.
But Nick Chubb needed that third touchdown.
Right.
Got to get that third TD.
Got to give the Jets a lot of credit for coming back in that game. Nobody thought they were going to be able to less than 2 minutes, down 2 scores. Nobody foresaw the Jets being able to come back, but you got to give they got help from the Browns too, because was it Corey Davis had a long touchdown, nobody near him, and then being able to get the game-winning touchdown to Wilson, if I'm not mistaken.
So. Yeah, I think you're right.
So you got to give the Jets. So you went Garrett Wilson, I went Joe Flacco. Great.
I know that the Browns are waiting for Deshaun Watson, but I have a hard time believing that they're going to be able to stay afloat without. I know that they don't want to make a move at quarterback. They don't want to waste the cap space or waste draft capital or whatever. But if you want to stay afloat to give Deshaun Watson a chance from week 11 onward or week 12 onward, well, at this point, Jimmy Garoppolo's
could have been Jimmy G, but he's the starter in San Fran now.
It just sucks because they should have known. If you've watched football, you know Jacoby Brissett is not the answer at quarterback as a starting quarterback. He's just not the answer.
I agree. All right, so the Philadelphia Eagles 2-0, tied for first place in the NFC with the New York Stinking Giants, 24-7 win over the Minnesota Vikings. Their next game this Sunday at FedEx Field against the Washington Commanders and our old friend Carson Wentz. Now, Connor, we are going to talk about this on Friday, but do you have early thoughts on the Eagles-Washington game?
Don't sleep on Washington.
I agree with that.
I mean, I think,
Carson is Wentz, second in the league in passing right now, I think.
Yeah, and listen, at the end of the day, can Carson Wentz make bad decisions? Can he throw picks? 100%, but can he also lead a team to – I understand they lost their lines. That was a hard-fought game, 36-27, lots of garbage time work for Carson Wentz there. But at the end of the day, don't underestimate them. And they're not even fully – they're missing their best edge rusher in Chase Young. Like
he'll be out. So he's actually going to be out for a little bit longer too. Like apparently that was a lot worse injury than thought out. The only
probably similar to J.K. Dobbins, or was a full-on torn everything in his knee.
So Carson got sacked 7 times I think against Detroit, and their fans hate their team. There's going to be so many Eagles fans at this game. It wouldn't shock me if it feels like an Eagles home game.
Doesn't it always feel like an Eagles home game in Washington?
That's very true. Like there's 2 separate Philly fan groups going, and it'll have over 1,000 people each. Like it's going to be crazy how many Eagles.
But
fans.
I think the big thing here is don't be mad if it's close.
Oh, it's going to be close.
I think it's going to be a close game. A, it's a divisional game, and B, people are just sleeping on the Commanders.
And they have a lot of injuries, so we'll see. They have Carson Wentz, who, look, I like Carson. I'm a Carson fan. Does he have brain glitches every once in a while? Yes, he does. So we'll see what happens. But I definitely am looking forward to this Friday when we get to talk Eagles, Washington. So please join us Friday around the same time, 6:15-ish, as we get you ready for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. Big game. Eagles win. We'll keep them in first place no matter what happens Monday night between the Giants and the Cowboys. Loss, and there could be, depending on what happens in that game, could be 4 2-1 teams going into week 4 in the NFC. Thank you for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour. He's Connor. I'm LJ. Have a good night. Go Birds.
You want Philly?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sanders patiently running. Sanders good cut. And another block. Sanders still going inside the 40.